¿Ya se conectaron a la sala? ¿Ya se conectaron a la sala? Ya estamos transmitiendo. Listo.
Hola a todos, bienvenidos. En unos minutos vamos a empezar. Estamos esperando que las personas que están virtual se conecten. Entonces, en unos minutos iniciamos.
2 o 3 minutos, ¿no? Tampoco.
Sí, claro. Algo importante a tener en cuenta para los chicos que están en la sala, si desean hacer preguntas, levantan la mano para brindarles un micrófono y que nos puedan escuchar en el en vivo.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos y primero que todo quiero darle la bienvenida al doctor Ramiro Liscano, que es nuestro invitado de hoy en esta charla sobre Supporting Quality of Service in Industrial Wireless Sensor Networks. El doctor Liscano es profesor emérito del Departamento de Ingeniería Eléctrica y Software de la Facultad de Ingeniería y Ciencias Aplicadas de la Universidad de Ontario Tech en Canadá. Tiene un PhD en Systems Design Engineering de la Universidad de Waterloo. Su interés de investigación a lo largo de los años ha tenido una mezcla entre academia, gobierno, instituciones de investigación e industria privada. Las principales áreas de investigación del doctor Liscano son computación móvil y pervasiva, redes de sensores, sistemas distribuidos y software engineering. Tiene a su haber más de 185 publicaciones en journal con revisión por pares y conferencias internacionales y es coautor de al menos 13 patentes. Es IEEE Senior Member de la Sociedad de Computación y de Communications y un ingeniero con matrícula profesional o licenciado de los ingenieros de la Academia de Ontario. Quiero agradecerle también muy especialmente a los chicos de la rama estudiantil de la universidad y a los chicos del capítulo ComSoc y a todos los que nos acompañan remotamente también de los diferentes capítulos ComSoc de Chile y Perú. Y no siendo más, pues le cedo la palabra al doctor Liscano. Permítame, yo empiezo a compartir la presentación.
Bueno, hola. Bueno, discúlpame porque voy a presentar en inglés. Es más fácil para mí. Hablo en español un poco y entiendo mucho. Nació aquí en Cali, pero mi familia se fue a Canadá cuando fue muy pequeño. ¿Todas las personas aquí entienden inglés? ¿Sí? Personas, sí. Bueno. Ok. Tengo que cambiar. All right. So I'm going to be speaking about quality of service in sensor networks. And please, anytime you have a question, you can ask a question. I will try to not be too detailed, because it gets a little boring. So hopefully you won't fall asleep. And so we'll see what we can do. I'm a professor emeritus. That means that I retired and I spent 18 years at this university. It's a new university in Canada. And I was actually one of the founding professors in software engineering. I teach software engineering, but I actually have research in both software engineering and as well in networking area. So that's why I can speak about networking area, but also I taught software engineering. Well, this works. Let's see. Oh, no problem. Okay.
Listo, profe. Inténtalo, ¿no?
So if you don't know, a professor emeritus means that you don't get paid. I don't teach anymore, but I do research work. I still have projects. Right now I have a major project with IBM in actually software engineering work. And this is some work that I've been doing through a grant from Canada, an NSERC grant. Okay, let's hope this works. So just to know a little bit, because more likely you haven't visited. Anybody been to Canada? I know some professors have, but no. So university is in Oshawa, a town called Oshawa. And it's about, well, the distance from Oshawa or Toronto, it's very close to Toronto. It's about 6,000 kilometers from Cali. Took me 6.5 hours to fly here. And the difference in latitude is 43.5 for us, and you're here very close to equator. So it's quite a difference in everything. Doesn't matter in climate. But we're nearly straight north. So Cali, Saki, Cali. And we're pretty well right about there. So it's nearly straight north, at least in this flat map. I'm not a flyer, so I don't know. A very close kind of view. If you look at Canada, well, most of that is the United States. Most of Canada is actually in the south part. So unfortunately, you see most of the United States. So most of Canada is around here. So I wanted to zoom in to this area. And in this area, there are very large lakes. And Toronto is in this area here, which is the capital of Ontario province, very big province. And Oshawa is very close to it, very close to Toronto. If you obviously you haven't been there, but if you actually ever travel, you probably end up in Toronto or Ottawa. I now live here. My family's here. So when I retired, I moved to Ottawa. It's about 400 kilometers east of Toronto. And it, unlike Columbia, there's not many mountains here. Mountains are in the west. I can drive in 4 hours, 500 kilometers, because you have a very mountainous area. This is the United States. This is the border, actually, very close to the border between the United States and Canada. So a little bit of geography on that, just to give you a feeling of where I'm at. The university is called Ontario Tech University. It actually started in 2003. So it's not very old, 22 years now, close to 22 years old. This is 45, if I'm not mistaken, 40, maybe something like that. It was not as big as you guys. You have a lot of, it's very nice. You have a lot of programs. It's very interesting. We're mostly focused on what we call STEM in English, which is science, right? Science, technology. So we have engineering, computer science, business and information technology, which you have here, and health science, which you have here as well, social sciences. Very strong in energy systems. So we have Oshawa is very close to 2 nuclear reactors. And so we have one of the only few nuclear programs in Canada. So we have a very strong nuclear program. When they started the university, there was a lot of support from Ontario Hydro, which is involved with nuclear, well, just power in general, right? Power. We have about 11,000 students. How many do you have here? Anybody know? How many students? No? No, 8,000? Oh yeah, because you're very small, you have very small classes, which we don't have. We do have, I teach software engineering. Our classes are about 100 students right now in 3rd or 4th year. 30, exactly. Yeah, we couldn't afford that. There's no way. we need at least 100 students or more to make a program feasible. All our institutions in Canada are public. They're semi-private. They're public institutions, so they're sponsored by the government. We don't have any private universities, unlike Canada, unlike the United States. We don't have. They're all public institutions. That doesn't mean that it's cheap. It's not low price, because it's a bit different. If you're interested, I can explain it to you at some point how it works. So these are both graduate and undergraduate, so similar to here. How many are master's students here or postgraduate? Are you mostly undergraduate or postgraduate yourselves? You're undergraduate? Undergraduate. Okay, that's interesting. So it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see what you understand or not, because your program, this is from a graduate student, some of this work I've done. So you might find it, you take some networking courses, but you might find it a little bit different. Okay, so yeah, so I've talked a bit about this. I've had various different careers starting with robotics originally, robotica, robotics work, and moving towards mobile pervasive computing, software engineering type of work. So that's my background. 20 years, I've been mostly focused on what they call sensor networks. Do you understand, like, sensor networks? Do you know what that is or not? Like a sensor network? You know what networking is? So it's wireless. It's wireless sensing. It's primarily a large number of sensors communicating through wireless. Most of these implementations are, I'm focused on large environments like vineyards and greenhouses because they require large distances, and hence it's good to have wireless in those environments, right? In academic area, I've been mostly looking at these, what they call MAC layer. That's why I wanted to ask you about networking, because if you don't understand MAC, I'm working this MAC layer, which is medium access area, where you actually, once you connect wirelessly, you have to basically try to negotiate communications between devices. That's called MAC layer in networking wireless. Well, thank you. And some work in localization in that area too. So some of my early research, this, for example, are sensors that we had built, and with a collaboration with a vineyard. The problem in the vineyard, very interesting in Canada. They have some places where cold air comes in and causes a pool of cold air, which changes the conditions of the climate conditions of where you're growing grapes, and can actually basically destroy the grape, right? Because your grape requires some amount of heat. You won't get the sugar out of it without the temperature. So we have places where this can happen, and then that part of the land is not usable for growing grapes unless you turn on a fire or you turn on a fan. And I don't think you have that here. I went to visit in Bogota. I was there last week. I went to visit a vineyard. I don't think there's any problems there. In Canada, we have fans and to blow the air, because if it gets below zero too early, you will lose the grapes, right? And if you ever go visit, we have something called ice wine, which is actually wine that gets produced in the winter. It's actually very sweet. It's like a liqueur. It actually gets picked. So some grapes stay for the winter. You can pick them in the winter, and they produce a very sweet type of wine. It's called ice wine. So this is the problem. It's a problem. So the idea here was that you could try to hopefully measure that temperature, that change that happens, and then be able to react to it, so that you can turn around. It's an area that's called precision agriculture. It happens all over the world now, which is you need to do more precise planting and precise measurement of water or fertilizers or things like that, because it's becoming like water is a very expensive, item in certain countries, right? Like in Israel, it's not a lot of water, so they got to make certain that you actually water things very properly. I have put down here in certain slides, certain publications I have, because I'm not going to go into detail on these. But if you have a chance, or I can send these to you. This was done quite some time ago, so that's why I started off with that. So we moved on to looking at greenhouses. You have this concept here. I've seen it in Bogota. I haven't seen it very much here. They grow flowers a lot and tomatoes in greenhouses. In Canada, we have large greenhouses growing tomatoes as well. The problem with a greenhouse is that they plant different plants in different places at different times. And you have to monitor the temperatures and humidity in those areas, right? Otherwise, you're going to have problems with some of your plants. So we tried to develop a system. Actually, this is a commercial one, but we looked at one of the first sensor networks around. So this is a sensor network idea. You have these sensors that connect wirelessly to each other, and they create a network, and they can transmit data across that network to some coordinator, so you know what is happening in that coordinator. Oh, there we are, good. So some of my early research, this is actually a view of the top of the campus. Like they used to be, this is a big lake or small pond, or, which is for rainwater. And we had, no, sorry, this is another word. This is a field. It's a field with a dome, and also worked on an area of trying to look at mobile type of sensing. So what happens if I have a sensor and I move around? How can I actually effectively capture data with that movement, especially using multi-hop sensors? And I was trying to find a good picture indoors for that, but I don't have one. So I used to give a bunch of sensors about this big to students, and they walk around and we monitor to see what the conditions were like how much we lose, how much. And I created some protocol, which is called FNACTP. This protocol is a routing protocol that's widely used in sensor networks. So this is kind of idea here, some fixed nodes, and some people would start around these spots and then walk around. So I'm going to jump into a bit more of the quality of service side of things, which is newer. I'm going to talk about this protocol. Anybody heard of this? Do you know this protocol? 802.15.4. Anybody? No? No? Okay, that's good. Well, it's not good, but it's I can teach you a little bit about it. So 15.4 is a MAC layer protocol. So when you use Wi-Fi, you use 802.11. So Wi-Fi, which is, Wi-Fi, the term, I will use it in English. So Wi-Fi, I don't know if you use it in Spanish. It sounds like you do, right? Wi-Fi. So 802.15.4 is a protocol that's used like Bluetooth. Bluetooth? Again, I'm just asking because in Spanish, maybe some of the words might change over, but Bluetooth. So Bluetooth uses 15.4 as a protocol. 15.4 is a low energy, lossy protocol. That means that it's designed, again, for low energy and loss of data. And it's used widely for your headsets. You use Bluetooth. Anything that uses Bluetooth uses 15.4. So if you're using a headset, wireless headset, I don't know about this guy. No, this is probably proprietary. But 15.4 is what I've worked on for many years. So one of my first work, well, not first work, actually, this is in fact, so all the sensors you saw use 15.4 in some way and manner. 15.4 is a family of different types of versions protocols. Wireless is nasty. It's a nasty thing to work with because wireless, unlike anything that's wired, it has collisions, it has interferences. And what happens in wireless is, even though you have 802.11, which is Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi is a version of 802.11 that is specific for the home sort of transmission. You'll find, I don't know, 10 or 12 different versions of 802.11, maybe, but the same thing in 802.15.4. They focus on certain domains or certain areas, certain problems. Wi-Fi is high bandwidth, so high power consumption. Why? This is low bandwidth and lower power consumption, lower distances, right? Like, for example, 15.4 will run 10 meters or 100 meters at most, depending on which setting you have. All right, so in my work, I leverage this protocol. And what happens is one of the works I did about 4 or 5 years ago, this is the way the frame looks like when you transmit. It's called the frame and MAC layer. And you can do kind of really interesting things with that protocol. So for example, the frame has something called a cap and a CFP portion. And in fact, a portion of nothing. So what happens, as I mentioned to you, in cap, which is actually a contention access. So when you're talking and you're communicating wireless, what is happening is you're colliding with things. People are actually also sending things out, and you got to listen. Before you transmit, you have to listen. Say, somebody transmitting on that channel? If not, I'll transmit. So this is called collision cap, CFP, collision access period, contention, sorry, contention. Contention means that you are waiting and you're contending, right? And when you contend and wait, that means you have long delays and you have some issues. Sorry, should be standing up here? Okay. It's just better to view from here, right? Okay. When you get into contention-free period, you have to time it. That means that only one device can talk in that period of time. Each one of these is a period of time called slots. So you can only transmit. That means that you have to have somebody coordinating. So if your cellular using cell phones use TDMA, which is contention-free. That's what they utilize to get better quality of service, and minimize collisions. So that's contention. What happens here? Nothing. Okay, nothing. So what happens when you have nothing? What does it mean? You don't consume energy, right? The best device that's going to last forever is going to do nothing, which is not useful, right? So what it lets you do is it lets me investigate at one time. Well, if I have a contention access section and a contention free and nothing, well, what seems to be the best configuration you could have, the most optimal configuration you could have for conditions that you're trying to deal with. That's what the research was about. And actually, I've got this slide. If you don't understand contention a little bit, I had this slide. So what happens if A transmits to B, and then C tries to transmit to B? It's collision. You lose a packet. Sorry, it's a frame. So you lose the data. You can't communicate. You lose it. It's gone. So you have to retransmit it. And same things happen in other scenarios like this. So that's why. So the question becomes, well, why don't we have everything contention free? Why don't we do that? Well, the reason is because for contention access, you need a coordinator. You need somebody who coordinates your transmissions. So in telecom companies, they have coordinator, and they coordinate when people transmit on different channels, so there's no collision. In Wi-Fi, it's collisions all over the place. But the reason Wi-Fi then is simpler, it's simpler to connect ad hoc. You connect ad hoc, it's much easier because of this contention-free section. That's why we have it. Okay, so I developed this work in 2021 with a master's student, really bright student I had, and we created a concept of a network. Most sensor networks transmit to one location. They send their data to one location, which is this one in the middle. And we developed this approach where you could have these, it's like a tree. You can see it's like a tree, right? It's formed. You have little branches in the tree. And therefore, what happens is we would set up a situation where among the sink, we call it a sink, and those heads of the tree, you would have contention free. And then among here, you'd have ad hoc contention access. So we put together this approach, an algorithmic approach. And the challenge was, well, okay, we have these setups like this. How do we decide basically how many contention free we have? And so GTS is the same as contention free, sorry. So we use a different terminology there. It's called guaranteed transmission, which is contention free. So we have, how many do we have that are contention access and the other one contention free? And we put in some assumptions about that and how many we have inactive. Take a look here. There's very little, like 9 and 16. This is the maximum, this is 25. You can have in this frame up to 15,000 slots. So most of it is empty. And so the concept here was, how many of these could we have and how we could optimize that. That's the idea behind that work, right? How we optimize that. And we use something called differential evolution optimization. I'm not an optimization person. That's not my expertise. But I've done now 3 projects using this DE. It's called differential evolution. It's a bit like a genetic approach. Genetic style of optimization. I don't know if you've managed to cover that or not. Or it's mostly a graduate sort of topic, not as much undergraduate. But what happens with, I'll talk a bit about DE. It's mostly around, you create samples randomly, and then you genetically disturb them, and then you find the best one, this approach for that. So if you're doing optimization, you probably want to deal with it. Most of those optimizations deal in this manner. Okay. So what happens here, just to give you a feeling, as a big picture, here we have a sequence diagram. So if you have a population that you generate a population, then you iterate through the population. And when you iterate through the population, you actually run it through a simulator. Well, we run it through a simulator. You could run in real life if you want. We ran it through a simulator. And you execute the frame that you want, and you see what happens. And then you do this many times. And eventually, you get something that is behaving well. Not the best, but well. So it's called suboptimal. Suboptimal. And so you calculate the energy consumed and you pick the one that's the best one that you found for that period of time. That's kind of the way they work. They all work this way. All sort of genetic algorithms work in that manner. And so we did this, and it's any paper that you write, we then try it with some simulator, and then we say, okay, you know, how did it work out? Did we successfully do something or not? You know, and so we tend to run some experiments in certain scenarios. In this case, we had an area 300 by 300 meters, 70 meter transmission. Again, I told you 15.4 is roughly 100. That's generally what they cover, 100 meters, sometimes 10 meters if it's very low. And we use a propagation model. So when you do simulations, you got to know how those transmissions propagate, what happens. You have to simulate that example. So it's called free space. Start with a certain amount of energy, and then you run your experiment. So what happens is you kind of see, this is kind of the optimization that happens. Yeah, this is super frame size. So you change the size of your super frame. You try to see what happens. So you do a lot of, I don't know how many, do you guys do a lot of simulation? I think in undergrad, you might not. You take networking courses, I guess, but you think you do more physical. You connect things together, try to configure them, I think, right? I see some nodding. We have simulators I use. Do you use simulators at all? Much? Do you know? Maybe networking simulators. So a lot of them around, people use them because the real environments are difficult to work on. So we run that. Here you get some optimization. You have super frame size, and you get some points up here. These are the better points. And unfortunately, you have to choose one of those. So if you want lower super frame size, super frame is the size of frame, then you can choose this point. If you are 100, you want to choose that point, or 150, you want to choose that point. So you actually have this ability to choose which super frame. And so it's an example of happened. We ran simulation 50,000 times. CFB 7 slots, the cap was 4, 229 was inactive, and we had 41,000 joules left over, you know, from that. That's the results that we have. What do they mean? Well, the more joules you have left over, the longer your network lives. So it depends what you're trying to optimize, you know. Okay, it's good. See some nodding, that's good. You're nodding a bit, so it means you see what's going on. Now I'm going to talk about something called 15.4e. I told you 15.4 had different versions. 15.4e came on board, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe, trying to remember now. It was designed mostly for industrial applications. So 15.4, like Bluetooth, was not designed for that. It was designed primarily for headphones. That's just the way Bluetooth started. I worked with Bluetooth many years ago. The driving factor in Bluetooth was headsets. That's what drove it. And the only reason it caught on, for many years, it was nobody wanted to use it. But the reason it caught on is because people wanted to use different headsets with different phones. That was the only reason. And then all of a sudden, that was it. Because, you know, you could buy like a mouse. If you have a mouse like this, you see this? It doesn't use Bluetooth. It uses proprietary communications because they can sell you the USB chip, the USB connector, and this together, but not with headsets. So that's the way it caught on. And now it's all over the place, right? It's crazy. Is that what you call it? Bluetooth? Everything? People use Bluetooth in the car, whatever. Okay. So 15.e is designed for industrial environments. And now 2012, that's what it was. So in 2012, so that's only 10 years ago? Wow, okay, a bit more than that. So they released this 15.4 is a working group. Oh, I didn't put it down. Have you heard of IETF? IETF? So it's a work, pardon? That's right. That is the one that they use a lot for open protocols that they develop. So they created this. They managed 15.4. It's not EEE protocol, but it's put into IETF. And so the working group developed this E section. Now E, what it does is, again, it specifies 3 different styles of MAC layer, especially. These are all MAC layer protocols. They're not routing, they're all MAC layer. So they're just above physical. Physical is antenna, and MAC is right above that. And then you hit the routing layer. So you study that, I think, in networking courses, you study these layers. So that's what these are MAC layers. And so I'm going to digress a little bit just so you understand. And so when like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, they're end-to-end protocols. They specify all the way from application down to the bottom. Wi-Fi does the same thing. That's why you get these things happening, because otherwise things wouldn't interact unless you have full layer. Okay. So I think I'm running out of battery. Oh, I don't know if I can get somebody. Yeah, don't think this pointer is working that well now. Did our helper disappear? I think so. I think our battery died here. Yeah, okay. I may have to use the screen or something. Okay. If you find our helper, she can come and see if she can get that working. So I'll switch to this one because then I can switch screens here. And maybe this camera might be facing the wrong way. Do you have a battery for this? Pardon? Okay, gracias. Okay. I'll just put this one down. Okay. Put this page down. Page up. Okay, good. All right. All right, so I'll move here until I get the pointer working. So anyway, they have these three types of protocols. You can see them in the little dots here. I'll move this over here so I can point. I'll change this over here a little bit. Oh, there it is. Okay. It's better. So these three protocols, TSCH, DSME, LLDN, they actually are just different versions of 15.4e. I work with TSCH. That's the bottom. As I mentioned, it's a MAC transmission protocol designed for basically industrial applications. This requires that the nodes be coordinated. That means you need a coordinator, somebody in the middle that decides how it's going to schedule the transmissions of all these slots, right? Remember I told you about this, the CFP, contention-free. TSCH is contention-free. Oops. Now, what's the difference between this? Well, remember last time I showed you that something was flat, right? It wasn't two-dimensional, it was flat. TSCH, what it does is it says, look, you cut these slots in certain time frames in here, but guess what? You also have channel offsets. That means that you can actually transmit in different channels. Do you know what channel is for transmission? It's basically just a certain frequencies that are used for transmission. So if I transmit in this frequency and someone else transmits a different frequency, there's no collision. There's no problems, right? There's no interference. So it combines channel offsets and time together. That gives you more bandwidth. It also allows you to transmit certain things together. So for example, here, node 5 and 4 can transmit, and nodes 2 and 1 can transmit at the same time because there's no interference for those because of distance. So they don't interfere. Oops, sorry. Oh, press something by mistake. So therefore, they can be placed in the same channel. So in the same channel, you can transmit these two. But on the other hand, you can't transmit, if 5 transmits to 4, 4 can transmit to 3, because again, in wireless, you cannot transmit and receive at the same time. You can only do one thing, unless you have different channels, right? So this is why when you have 5 to 4, you're not going to get 4 to 3, or if you have interference, you're not going to be able to put them together. So there are some spots here. Well, this is not very good. So here, for example, we have 2 and 1 and 3 and 2 talking to each other. Because actually, these shouldn't, yeah, because they're in different channels. But actually, this is not good. This is not a good example because typically those devices cannot transmit and receive at the same time. That's just based on the antenna, based a lot on so if you have multi-antenna or MIMO systems, you've heard of MIMO, M-I-M-O, MIMO, which is multi-antenna, they can transmit and receive simultaneously. Okay. Okay, so what was the objective for this project? It was to find this optimal schedule. So 802.15.4e doesn't tell you what schedule to use. It just says, this is the way that the packets, the frame is going to look like. It's going to look like, oops, sorry, go back a bit. Oh. So it doesn't tell you, if I go back here, it doesn't tell you who's going to transmit where. It's called a schedule. And so the challenge with us is to say, well, how do I find optimal schedule that's going to work for the scenarios I have? In my work, we wanted to try to make certain that we meet certain quality of service. So when I say quality service, what happens is you want to know, you want to have certain bandwidth to go through, throughputs. You want certain throughputs, you want certain delays, and you want to have typically a certain amount of energy. That's not really quality service. So somebody will tell you in industry that they want to have this packet come within this period of time. Otherwise, the system will crash or something will happen. So think about medical problems, right? You have somebody, how many people have smartwatches here? You have smartwatch everywhere, okay? Now, you don't use them medically. You use them mostly to monitor. So your quality services, you don't care. You don't care maybe if you get some value at a certain, I don't know, maybe an hour is too bad. You think, oh, no, that's not good. I don't want an hour. But as you move into problems that require more monitoring, quicker and faster to react, then you need a certain time. In cars and automobiles, for example, that's very important. In airplanes, that's very important. But what's happening in automotive, for example, they don't use wireless a lot because of those delays and loss of data, because otherwise you crash, right? Because you won't get this time. So these are safety critical problems that come into play. So they were listed. You cannot, this application must have this quality of service. Okay. So we assume that a fixed number of channels, remember channels were the vertical ones, but the slot frame can change. And what we need to keep in mind is that there's a certain throughput. That means that when you generate data, you need to transmit all that data. That's called a throughput, and you want to transmit it. So we first target the throughput into the application, and then we try to optimize that. What you need to keep in mind is that this is called a slot frame right here. Oh, sorry, I can't find my mouse here. So the slot frame is the bottom, the horizontal is the slot frame. Okay, what you got to keep in mind is that the smaller the slot frame is, the smaller the delay, right? That means that you transmit quicker, faster, takes less time, but you consume energy. So that means your batteries will die faster, right? So that's the trade-off that happens in nearly all wireless devices, is that trade-off between transmissions and basically the time you're sleeping. All right, so what do we do? What do we do here? Okay, this is going to be a little complicated. I hope people don't fall asleep. I'm not trying to see, maybe you can help me here. There's a mode here where I can draw, right? This is in Spanish. Mostrar el motor, ampliar. I know in English there's a way that you can get a pointer, right? Oh, here we are. Oh, there we are. Pluma. Okay, pluma makes sense. Okay, let's try the pluma. Okay. All right. So the way that we do this is we have this nodes. Let's say this is an example, very small amount of nodes. And so generally number one is a collector. That's the one that receives all the data in a sensor network. The rest of them actually connect. So this, I have a better diagram later. This is actually telling you the connection. So like 2 transmits to 1, 3 transmits to 1, 4 to 3, 5 to 3, 6 to 4. So you can actually kind of, put in lines here if you want. I have a better diagram that 3 to 1, so on and so forth. That's routing. That's called routing, when you know where things are going to go. In the MAC layer, you need to know where to go, but MAC layer don't deal with that. Okay, so one of the first things we do here is we start to look for what they call the collision graphs or the interference graphs. So we try to see which nodes, with our understanding of the range of those devices, which are going to collide and which are going to interfere. So if you look here, for example, 2-1 will collide with 3-1. If 2 transmits to 1, 3 transmits to 1, you have collision. to talk in the same place. They can collide. So they're not like humans. You can collide, get around, and navigate through a door. Wireless, you can't. Wireless, you lose data. Basically, flips. What happens is it'll flip the bit, will flip, and that's it. Well, you can recover from that. If you study that, there are ways to recover, but basically, at one point, you won't recover. So these are collisions, and interferences are talking at the same time. So that's a bit more like when you guys talk, or we all talk. If I'm speaking, you're speaking, you get this interference, right? Can't understand. So anyway, we get these graphs, we put them together, and then what happens is we find what's called a free set. So we're looking for this free set, which is where we start off from. Where's what are those transmissions that are possible in a network that are theoretically free of collisions and interference? If you sort of look at these, they kind of, so here it's trying to say 2 can transmit to 1 and 6 can transmit to 4 at the same time without any problem. So we create that. That's the starting point of everything. So here is that network, but with there we are. But with the routing in it, right? And the circles mean the distance of communication. That's what it means. Those circles. That's the way we theoretically put them in, but in practice, these things vary like crazy in practice. So here's the collision interference graph, and then we end up with the transmissions in the free set that are there. Okay. Then what we do is we optimize this with differential evolution. And with differential evolution, like I told you, we generate populations. We turn around and say, okay, we generate a population of a schedule. What is a schedule? Schedule is what you saw before. It's basically who's transmitting when, right? Not only transmitting, but listening. That's another thing. Because in 15.4e, you can transmit certain times. If the other node doesn't listen, then you're going to lose it again. So you can schedule this in a network. So I'm not going to talk a lot about these details. So thank you. This has died. The concept here a little bit in this example. Oh, that's okay. So you have to turn it on. Yeah, no, but it died. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm back in business. Boring than standing at the front of the class. Okay, so what you see here is an example of well, we're starting, again, the details are a little boring. I'll show you a paper that we have if you're interested in details. But the concept here is that this is a population. This is an example. We tried to turn around and say, we have 2 channels. We have 6 slots in this example. And what we do is we randomly decide this in random numbers from 0 to 1. We create these numbers. We throw them into these slots. And then we order them in ranking. We rank them. And when we rank them, we use a ranking to try to decide who's going to transmit when. Okay? That's because all these techniques are random. All this genetic, anybody use genetic algorithm? No? Things like that. They're all random. They're population. You randomly create something and then you disturb it. There's a algorithmic way to do that where you basically change them and then you keep the best and you keep changing things and then you find eventually the better one. You're lucky if you can find the optimal. Okay, so here's a 6-node example. So these are ranked. You saw before probabilities. Now they're ranked by an index. We change them to an index. Basically, we take the slot numbers and then we see the highest one and we place it. Okay, this was number 2 was the highest one. We put it here. So this becomes index 2. So this becomes 3 and 1 transmission. This one becomes number 4, these 2 transmissions. And that's the way we do it. We just put them in there and then we place them in there and then we try it out. So let's go. So here's the transmissions. As an example, 6 slots, very simple example. It's over 1,000 slots that you use, but this is 6. And these are transmissions you can see that are happening 4 to 3, 3 to 1, 4 to 3, 5 to 3. These go together because of no interference. So you can see here that those are the ones that don't interfere. So they can be done together for that reason. Okay. Easy? Good? Understand that? Okay, great. Nodding. Excellent. Good students, right? Okay. Let's go to here. Then I talked about starting. Then we picked transmissions from the free set. That's what I've done here. Here's a, so this work was done by a graduate student, Ida Vatanka. She just completed her PhD. And this is the work I'm mostly talking about here. And this is the publication we did in SensorNets, which is a journal. Again, if you need some, if you really want, you can just search my name and you can find lots of them, but I can send them to you. Okay, that's what the work is there. All right. Again, very similar to the last thing we showed, sequence diagram. Remember, we had a sequence diagram last time we saw here. What occurs is we populate, generate the population. Then we iterate through the population. We execute a real network we want, or we execute a simulation. So we execute the frame that we develop to optimize, and then we see what happens. And so we get back throughput. In this case, in this paper, we want to go throughput first. We want to see, hey, can you achieve the throughput? That's kind of what the background. So as we move on, we change the objective function and we try to optimize for more and more. So in the end, you'll see we can optimize throughput, delay, and eventually get into energy as well. We got them all together. Okay, so that's what we do. We just run them through. Now you can imagine, I'm trying to think right now because I'm software engineering. In software engineering, they've been looking at, I try to remember in English the term, but they're trying to bring simulation in a lot into, or co-simulations into the software development. But in networking, we've been doing that forever. In networking, actually, you use simulators a lot because if you put this into a real environment, from the beginning, you're in trouble, right? Because your environment's working. So therefore, you should use a simulator. It's called a co-simulator because we use, we'll see later, we use two simulators. We use basically a TSCH simulator to run the network, and we use MATLAB. I think I've seen people using MATLAB, correct? You nod. You guys, graduate students or undergrad? Undergraduate? Well, that's good. I don't think there's any undergrads. Yes. So, that's used for the algorithm side, for the optimization. And then we combine it with the network simulator, which simulates a network. It's co-simulation. Okay. Now, this is going to look a bit confusing. I'm just going to try and explain it a little bit as best as I can. It's an example. So what happens is that at this point, we have actually just created the way that we would use the optimizer. That's all we've done. Because you got to take this optimizer and customize it to something that it's not, we don't use it for. We have to customize it for this frame, right? So this is, the previous slides were saying, this is the way we customize it. And the paper talks about that. So, but it hasn't done anything about, what size should this slot frame be? Like, that's what we're trying to figure out. How big should it be to actually hit the throughput? And the way we kind of do that is, here's an example, a little example. 1, 2, 5 nodes, and S1 being the collecting node, we call it the sink. And in this case, actually, these, we'll see an example later, these nodes transmit at different rates. That's nothing we're handling, trying to handle different rates, because some are transmitting faster than others. Just to give, again, it's a little challenging, but what we try to do is we try to create these pools of transmission. So these are sensors, sensor 2, sensor 3, sensor 4. We create these pools for transmission. So we say, okay, in slot 1, we need to transmit typically S2, S3, S4, S5, S6. All of them have to transmit because they're all generating data. But in slot 2, we need to transmit 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 again. Because 2, don't forget, these are the ones that are going to hit pretty hard, right? Because they're going to receive and they're going to transmit. Always the ones that are close to the sink are going to die first because they transmit more. So you see more S2s, and you see more S3s. So eventually what happens is this transmission sequence leads to a throughput of transmission of all the data you've created. And then you repeat it again. You say within these slots, I've managed to transmit everything I need to, and then I repeat it again, so forth. That's called throughput. All right, very simple example. What happens is you only have 4 channels maybe instead of 5. So you'll see later as an example. Here's an example here, 4 channels, not 5. So you cannot transmit everything. So you end up creating transmissions. Here, you know S5 and S6 can be gone together in this case because there's no interference. So you put them together. And then you randomly choose 3 more in there. You're missing 1 because there's 5 originally. So something's happened. 1, 2, 3, no, there's 5 there. Okay. So anyhow, you do this, you create these. So this is the actual schedule being created in only 6 slots in this example, just an example, not a reality example. You randomly choose these, and then you basically have basically the frame. You have the schedule, call the schedule. All right. There's an objective function. What is the objective function? Do you understand the objective function? That's what you optimize to. It's called objective function. You optimize to that. That's what determines if you've succeeded or not. In this case, what we want to do is hit a satisfied frame size that hits the throughput. That's our objective. We want to make sure we create a frame size large enough that you get the throughput. Step number 1, throughput. Oh, there we are. Okay, so this was an example, a much more complex example. The difference is here, these ones in green, these are the rates. So you can see this example has different rates of transmission of data because then that's a more realistic situation. For this sensor, we'd want to transmit this often, for another one, perhaps a little bit less. And then eventually, this is an example of what happens here. Eventually, what happens is you keep increasing the size of the frame size. This is the frame size, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 15. And finally, 15, you find that you hit the throughput. You know, that's the way we do it. We keep increasing the frame size. Eventually, you might find that you hit the throughput. It's not guaranteed. Too much data, you won't hit it. Okay. Okay, so this is the throughput. Some people nodding, that's good. Some people nodding. Hopefully not sleeping, that's the best part. Now I'll move to, unfortunately, the topic here. So what about the quality of service? We hit the throughput. What's missing is the delays. Now, energy is not a quality of service, but we'll see that later. Delay, and what's the other one? So we'll get to it. We mostly focus on delay. And the throughput and delay are the 2 that people really specify, but it should be there. Okay. Yeah, here's the delay, packet loss. Sorry, that's one, packet loss. So that'll be one of them. So what happened is, how do we know what people want? Well, that's really hard. It is really difficult. People don't tell you what they want. Anybody here in software engineering, software courses, software engineering? Okay, I teach requirements. Requirements are the most difficult thing ever, especially quality of service requirements. You want to talk to me about it? I teach that. It's really difficult. Nobody wants to talk about it. You know, how long does it take you to, what's the time for something? I don't know. I just want it as quick as possible. What is that? I don't know. But in networking, there are types of applications. Yeah, I do have someplace here the reference to this. We found a paper that talked about different industrial types of applications and their required delays and their packet losses. So these are taken from a paper. They're very hard to find, these papers. I've been searching for them for a long time that talk about wireless transmissions in industrial applications. So class 2 is a closed loop supervisor control type of application, and class 4 is a condition monitoring. So condition monitoring generally has much more tolerance, right? Less than 100 milliseconds. And closed loop requires these applications less than 50 milliseconds. You will never get real-time control with wireless. Anybody do control? Do you do a control course? You do a control course? Anybody else do control courses? Software engineers don't. They should, but they don't. That's because if you want to do software engineering in automotive embedded systems, you better know something about control. So anyhow, the point here is that, the best that you can do, those time slots I showed you before are 10 milliseconds. It's the best that you can do is 10 milliseconds. There are certain applications you cannot handle. 10 milliseconds is not good. right? And those tend to be real-time control systems. They'll just collapse from that. So anyway, these are closed loop supervisory. So we picked these up from a paper and we classified them as, we had some packet rates as medium and low. So there is some packet rate values that I haven't listed here. They're part of this standard, ISA SP 100. So if you're interested in that, look it up. ISA SP 100. There's a paper, I have referenced it, which talks about these sort of applications. So what we do for quality of service is we actually take, this is loss, and this is delay, and we take the different applications we have, and we try to minimize the overall delay that occurs in all the sensors that are in that network. So again, it's not one-to-one, it's many-to-one. We try to sum that difference up and divide and normalize it. So we take that delays and those losses, and we try to minimize these two together. So we try to minimize these, right? Try to minimize the delay and loss in this case, all right? These are, for example, scenarios we put together. We have a certain number of nodes. So in scenario 1, we would have 16, 36, 64, 100 nodes, same as the other scenarios. This scenario will have a medium, I think it's called, what's that one? Medium packet rate, sorry. And 50% of nodes have medium packet rate, and this is 50% loss. And so we have this information with us. You know, we vary it. We run a lot of simulations with that information. So if you consider that it's not just 5 scenarios plus combining these together. So we do that. And then we just see how has our approach achieved what we wanted to achieve. Take a look at this. What happens? This is what the delay is. Look at that. Can't achieve it. 100 nodes, can't achieve it. So at some point you can't achieve what those requirements are asking. Large networks, that makes sense, right? You're a large network, you won't achieve the delays. It's because too many hops. So you won't achieve that. So we could achieve in 64, 36, 16 number of nodes, we could achieve those delays in certain applications. So application 1, this was the delay that's required. In application 2 was a little bit more tolerant. Then it's a bit higher. We couldn't achieve it with 100 here. We're borderline. And the sort of information we're trying to gather, right? And PDR, which is packet loss, the same sort of problems with it, you know, same issues. Okay, and this is the publication in that case. This was published in, again, Sensor Networks in just last year. Okay, delay PDR. Oh, that's it. Okay, sorry, good jump. Okay, I'm gonna close it up. What time is it? Because I don't want to spend too much time. 12, okay, good, yeah. So all I'm gonna mention, just to whet your appetite in English. We say that whet your appetite. I know in Spanish, which means you get intrigued. So we're about, I think to our knowledge, we're one of the first persons to look at these QoSs in sensor networks. It's not very common to look at QoSs, especially in industrial environments. Now we do have a paper in adding energy. So what happens in the last slides I showed you, you get the minimal frame size, smallest, to get the best delay. But again, what do you lose? Energy, power, right? Energy. Because quality of service might say, oh, you have to achieve 50 milliseconds. You can make the frame larger. You can pack it with empty spots. I'll explain to you, I'll tell you at one point, you can't just add them at the end, but you gotta put them disperse them into the frame. And then what occurs is the frame becomes larger. You meet the requirements of your delay, but you save energy. So that's what that paper is about, this one. Okay, it's being published in ICC. Those of you who are doing investigations, ICC is a top conference in communications. It's happening in Montreal. So I'll be visiting Montreal. If you have a paper, you might have a paper, I don't know. Yeah, you guys undergraduates probably don't. You can go to Montreal and visit, and I can give you a bunch of hints about what there is in Montreal. I don't live there, but I've visited a number of times. So that paper is going to be published in June or presented in June. Now, the biggest problem I've had in several years is that there are many companies in Canada who've developed these products. They're mostly Asia or Europe. It's very difficult to find companies who might adopt what we've done because somebody has to build a sensor, has to put in the protocol, and you can do it academically. You can put it in a lab and set it up. I don't have the equipment. I have the equipment, not the TSCH protocol, but I have equipment with the older version, a very old equipment. So if I can get some new equipment, I can actually try to implement this protocol in real life. And so that's a big challenge to actually get some involvement with industry for that one. So with that, I will finish. Gracias. Su atención. Y open up for any questions that you might have. Oh, very quick. So I guess I have to give you I have to basically microphone.
Preguntas. Gracias. ¿Alguien tiene dudas, preguntas?
I've got two questions. The first one is, why isn't QoS for sensor networks researched more?
Why does it, sorry?
Why isn't QoS for sensor networks researched more?
It's a very good question. So let me see if I can answer this one. So the QoS fall a lot into industrial applications, certain types of applications. What I see happening right now, so in academia, what you see more is either minimizing and forget about the requirements of QoS. So what you see is you see a lot of work in like, this is the minimal energy, or this is the minimal delay, or this is minimal. But they don't take into account a combination of different QoSs that are in there. So these are most industrial networks. And what we see happening a lot now in practice, especially IoT, you have a Internet of Things, which is a big deal because everybody has it, is they don't require QoS in those environments. They're collecting, a lot of people collecting data. So I think the adoption is just starting with the protocol. There actually are real protocols. There's something called wireless HART, which uses TSCH. It's used actually in industry. And so the question is going to become whether they can achieve, whether they need to use those things for their applications. Yeah, I can think of a number of examples, especially medical examples, right, that require them. So I think we're at that point. That's when the adoption. So academically, they've mostly focused on minimizing one thing only. So academically, we've done them all together. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it makes sense that it isn't used as much as QoS in other areas.
Yes, that's right. Like in the telecom world, this QoS has been around for ages because of voice, right? Voice requires certain quality of service, less data actually. And in fact, if you're in telecom, the big thing in telecom right now is 5G and 6G, right? I never entered that area. I don't think they can do it. You know, they're trying to achieve, again, soft real time in a centralized style of transmission. Be interesting to find out if you believe that or not, it can happen. Because they want to talk about cars. They want to, do some form of coordination with cars in a transmission of going to base stations, which are, all those things cause delays, right? Tremendous delays compared to these protocols.
So with the coming of V2X, we could see more improvements on this area of QoS.
That's the goal of 5G, 6G. But the nice thing I'll tell you, the important thing here is that they have to take quality of service. There's no doubt about that. If you have a vehicle that's coming into a traffic condition, you must have a response time that must exist in the lights or something like that, right? It must exist. They have to respond within a period of time. Otherwise, you have a collision, you have a problem, right? These are safety critical problems. So I think we're entering the area of safety critical. Challenge is whether we can achieve that with the current. That's the way 5G is going. Do you know 5G or 6G, yeah. 5G? That's the way they're going right now. Those applications are becoming partially safety critical. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second question I may have doubts because I've had a lot to learn in networking, but if this protocol is not centralized or coordinated by I don't know, an orchestrator or like the coordinator
Yes,
that you said,
coordinator, that's correct.
how do these nodes tell to each other, wait, it's my turn to send or to receive?
Well, that's the contention access protocol. That's the way things work right now. Like in Bluetooth, there's no coordinator. Well, there could be, but typically there isn't. Especially Wi-Fi, there's no coordinators that exist. So that leaves you ability to do more ad hoc connections because no coordinator. But the trouble with that is you can't achieve the quality requirements, QoS requirements that you want. You can't guarantee. It's not guaranteed. I grew up in, I'll even relate it to you in telecom. So I worked in telecom. And I grew up in that period of time when we used to use large switches to transmit voice. And then came IP, okay? There are many people who said IP would not work, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. That's problems. I mean, it does work to some degree, but it's a terrible protocol because it has no guarantee, right? It's no guarantee. But why do we use it? Because it's cheaper, and you put up with the problems that exist in IP, right?
Yeah, it's the best we have.
Well, no, the best we have was TDMA. It was actually, I forgot now, maybe you might remember the big switches, Nortel and all those companies, they were using, I forgot what protocol it was. So it's many years ago, but they switched out of that into IP now. But that was sequence, that was coordinated transmissions. They actually, you could guarantee delays in voice that were, well, voice they use more, the differential of delay, sorry, for that name. But anyhow, they were guaranteeing that you would get a certain quality. You ever heard of 5 nines?
No, I don't think so.
Means, well, that's actually reliability. That's 5 nines mean 99.9999% of the time
Yeah.
your system's working. Well, in IP, you're lucky if it works. But we live with it now. It's cheaper, right? But it's not. So what I'm trying to do is create the same analogy that exists, which is it's a cost-based. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so there is a person here in the chat called Danny Villa. So he has a question. So, okay. So first of all, I think so. I'm gonna tell this one because you were answering some question from my fellow here. So it says, oh yeah, is they produce the impact? How can this be analyzed? Or what metrics can be fundamental for this? I don't know if this question you understand.
Sí, pero es que esta pregunta no es una question. Yeah, no, it's a bit challenging. Okay, no.
Danividas, does massive or critical IoT have an impact on quality of service? And if so, how could it be analyzed or what metrics would be essential?
So the first part is for critical applications.
Yeah, he says that those massive or critical, massive IoT or critical does have an impact on quality service.
Yes, of course, yeah. I mean, that's the way things are going. If you think IoT applications now have no quality of service, but all those other required quality of service are left behind. So the question becomes, which ones are they? Which are those? So the ones that are require quality service are the safety critical ones, right? The ones that require, I give an example of things like if you're trying to coordinate traffic lights with cars, you have a safety critical problem. But right now, most IoT is collection, right? Collecting data. That's why data analytics is a big deal now, right? Because data analytics is there's so much data to collect. But if you look at it, so if anybody studies data analytics, well, we do a little bit of that, you will see that there's streaming data, which becomes more real time, and there's a passive one, which is like collected and analyze it a week later or whatever. It's those ones that are streaming that are, those applications require the quality of service. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Professor Liscano, for your visit. Probably it is not my area of expertise, but I have some students from an artificial intelligence class.
Yes.
So I have two questions for you. One's related to that is that, have you heard of any like recent applications from AI, from the point of view of AI, to these sort of quality of service problems? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I've been finding that a little interesting and challenging. I'll tell you why. So I do work in machine learning in other problems I have. Like I told you, I work for IBM. We all do, all that's machine learning we're doing. We're trying to find faults. Where the challenge lies is in networking. A lot of machine learning is being used, and mostly used for classification, like security. Like we try to find, classify data. It's less obvious where it fits into this work. So optimization, this is an optimization problem, not a classification problem. So the answer is yes. There's a lot of machine learning in networking. I don't know if you've done it, so you might know where, but I found the most in classification. So when you try to classify the types of traffic going through the network, then you use classifiers, you can use machine learning. In here, we already know the types of traffic. We don't have to classify them. We know what they are, and we know their quality service. That's such a big difference between backend and like this type of work. So in this work, we haven't moved towards machine learning because it's not clear where it fits in. But I certainly know where it fits in overall in networking, you know, where it's useful. Does that help you? Or does that answer?
Sure. I just wanted to see if I can put some work on them about this. Maybe I will. Academic work, I mean.
Anybody in security? Security is a classic example. Yeah.
And the other question is related to something that you mentioned at the beginning about the size of your classes, like 100 students, right?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
So in here, we have a constraint. It's
Yes.
the amount of computers that we can allow in a classroom for
Yes.
them to work. That's why we have that small amount of students. That's the main reason.
Yes.
So I was wondering, if you have 100 students, how can you actually, I mean, they work on a big lab, or they just bring the laptops in an auditorium like this one?
Yes. So when the university was created, it was laptop based. We have no labs. There are no software labs. They're all laptop based. Every student has a laptop. And the university used to, in the tuition fee, they used to pay, students paid, and they would get a laptop. We switched away from that about 10 years ago, I think, roughly 10 years, where we put down a specification of the type of laptop students required, but they must come in with a laptop. So we removed the extra tuition fee, but they must come in with a laptop of this type. So we post that. So we know all the students have these types of laptops. And so we don't have physical labs anymore. Which is difficult because you show somebody around, can't show them a lab. So when they're working, unlike your classrooms where you have the cooperative work, we don't have many of those because students come with a laptop, and I get them to do exercises in class. Like I know everybody's laptop. That's it. So 100 students, 100 laptops.
But if you have 100 students, I mean, you are not by yourself. Do you?
No, if we have a tutorial style, I have TAs. They're called teaching assistants. That's correct.
But those TAs are, I guess, graduate students.
Yes, they are. Yeah, we use the TAs. We use the TAs to support graduate students. That's correct. Yeah.
So I just one more question about that.
Yeah.
Like, do you have then graduate programs in your area? And if
Yes.
so, do you have like financial support for like students abroad?
Yes. So we typically, we work a lot, very similar to, well, to any institution in North America, we're very similar, which is actually every graduate student we have must come in with minimal financial support in our institution. We must give them a certain amount of money. And that money the support comes from grants, like a grant that I would have, professor has, and a TA-ship or scholarship. We have scholarships, we have TA-ship, and we have the grant money to amount to a certain amount that we feel is going to cover the expense of a student. Yes.
So it's similar as it works in US.
Yes,
That's
we're very similar to that. Yes.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Professor.
Okay.
Any other question?
Pregunta, duda, problema existencial.
I think you mentioned that at the beginning, there in the University of Ontario Tech, you have a subject that is control, right? We don't have that subject here in software engineering, but I heard that in some other universities here in Colombia, like Nacional, in electronic engineering, they have that subject. And I was wondering if you can tell us why it's so important in software engineering in this case if we don't have it here.
Okay, so I'll explain to you why it's important. So it's a course. So you say subject, you mean a course. It's not a program. Because we have a course which is an embedded software. So you understand embedded software? No?
Pequeños, lo que también llaman ahora cyber physical systems.
Yeah, cyber physical.
Son pequeños dispositivos con software con muchas restricciones.
So what happens when you build and design embedded systems, you have a stronger criteria in terms of safety critical, of those quality values. So when students who are software students don't understand that, they don't understand the basic concept of what a control system is. I mean, you don't have to. So if you have one basic course, that's good enough, right? Probably. But they just don't understand this whole concept of what happens in a feedback loop in a system that's controlled, which this is what happens in most embedded systems like cars, automobiles, small devices, things of that sort that are primarily taking sensory data and controlling something. But we have the course in our institution, but our students, we've tried to put in a control course, but we just haven't been able to fit it in. But electrical students get control, mechanical, robotics, all have a control course.
But you're saying that it's more like for the physical part of the engineering, like electrical, electronic, not so close to software engineering, or it could be used also in software engineering.
Oh, yes, because everything is becoming software now. So it's not the physical part that's the key. It's the algorithms that are being written to make. I mean, take any autonomous vehicle now, right? It's a control system. So those people in cyber physical or robotics programs, they get those control because they have to understand control. But sometimes they're not very good at software. Do you have a program here, cyber physical or no, robotics? So we have this bit of so my background is robotics, so I understand that. So we have a robotics program, but they're not very good software engineers.
Okay.
But anyway, if you go work, it doesn't matter. You just go work for a company that's doing a cyber physical system. electrical engineers, software engineers. Right? That's typical what they get. Maybe robotics not, because it's not very common, but that's what you get, those two people. So then you work. Like I met a student from Waterloo working for General Motors, invited him to my class. I used to teach a real-time course, which is like an embedded course. And his background was electrical engineering, but he had to study software engineering to do that work. I mean, he didn't understand it until he got trained by the institution to understand. He understood control systems, but he didn't understand how you do testing in software engineering, how you develop a system, how you model it. What program are you in?
I'm software engineer.
Yeah, doesn't matter. You'll learn. I mean, that's the truth of any engineer.
Okay.
Is they'll just hire you and they'll say, okay, I'll teach you this. You learn it, because you have the ability to learn. So it's not, I mean, it's a bit of a loss when we teach it, but most cases the industry will teach you something, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Do you know of any free resources that could help a software engineer to get more involved in control?
Yeah, they're a basic textbook in controls. Pardon? I don't know the names, but no, I don't know about that. Oh, automatic control. Because you can take any course like that, or first like a book, and learn about it. It's hard because I came from that background, but that's why I ended up in software, because at the time I did a lot of robotics work. Oh, there was a lot of software development. Software engineers didn't exist, so I could move into that area. A lot of it's academic. That's the difficult part, like it's Nyquist diagrams, a bunch of things, and controls and stability. But the fundamental part, software engineering is about testing. So to understand the way a system works, especially with feedback, is probably good enough to understand that you need to meet these requirements in the way you write your software. Now, that's a big part in the embedded system. In fact, embedded systems, like I worked for a company, we had a project with them in Canada who build embedded systems, and they're very regimented. They don't mess around with latest of anything, because they need to guarantee everything's written for guarantee. So the way your operating system works, the operating system must guarantee that a certain task runs in a certain time. That's the important part in real time. Do you understand that? You're kind of nodding. So it's really you have real-time operating systems. Have you heard of that? Or like real-time operating systems? Or not? Or you take an operating systems course? Yeah. So real-time operating system guarantees that this task will execute in this time, finish in this time. Scheduling.
But by real-time operating system, what do you mean? Like, for example, the most famous operating systems I know are Linux and the different distros, Mac OS and Windows. Are those real-time OSs?
No, they're not. So in Canada, there's a company has QNX as a name. QNX is an operating system. They're very famous. Their operating system is for real-time embedded systems. Yes, based on Linux. Yes, that's correct. And that the modification generally is that guarantee of completing. The other operating systems, what they do is they just prioritize, process, and they execute it at best. It's like IP at best, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Y bueno, muchas gracias a los chicos de la rama que estuvieron tan activos. No se les olvide el Beatles. Y bueno, con esto cerramos la charla. Muchas gracias al doctor Liscano por por el tema. Yo sé que para algunos fue un poquito suajili, pero hay dos mensajes importantes. Fíjense que hoy en día hay un mix entre software engineering y electrónica y la electrónica convencional. Entonces, a los de software les toca aprender algo de sistemas de control y de telecomunicaciones y viceversa, porque al fin y al cabo hay cosas comunes, pero cosas muy particulares de cada disciplina, como el tema de calidad de servicio en wireless sensor networks, que es una cosa, es un reto importante. Pues bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos y pues con esto cerramos el evento del día de hoy. Nuevamente, muchas gracias al doctor Liscano.